Hey everybody, this is David, Caroline Luther, and here today we're going to be doing what should be a fairly short, simple video of installing railroad spikes on Banjo. Now we have here a nice old Gibson RB-11 that I've recut the heel and done a partial refret on, and we're going to be installing railroad spikes on that. Now, you know me, you know I'm a banjo guy, so this is kind of right up my alley. But one of the unique features of the 5-string banjo is you have this one tuner halfway up the neck. So this one string only goes up to here. And that creates a problem when you start using the capo, because if you capo here, it doesn't affect this string. So the most common way of doing that is with these tiny little nails, often referred to as railroad spikes, that you can hook the string up underneath it. And that's really the simplest and, in my opinion, the best method of doing this. There are 5th string capos that attach to the neck. Usually they're like something that permanently attaches and slides up and down. I've never been a big fan of those, and kind of get in my way in my hand when I'm playing, and they've never really been all that popular. I know a few people who use them, but I've always preferred railroad spikes. This banjo had one, looked like homemade railroad spike, like a huge nail that had been bent over. It was just way too tall. It was right under where the string was going to cause a buzzing. So we went ahead and got rid of that. So we'll be replacing that with a proper railroad spike and installing one more on it. Just get this banjo more playable, where you can use a capo and play whatever key you want. So we'll go ahead and show you how that's done. Okay, so we have our banjo here. So we've marked where our spikes are going to go. We have our little spikes here. It's kind of hard to see on camera because these things are tiny. It's just kind of a square head nail. Looks like a tiny railroad spike. That's kind of why they call them that. They also in the old days would have used railroad spikes from model trains before they actually made nails just for this. This is the traditional method for capoing the 5th string, and in my opinion still the best method for doing that. So we're going to drill a starter hole for each of these, and then drive these in with a dab of glue so it doesn't come out. This banjo had a homemade railroad spike of some sort, just some sort of a nail that had been bent over, driven in, but it was huge, and it got in the way of the string. You could not have a low action and that thing not vibrate off the top of it and buzz. So we've got rid of that, and we're going to be replacing the spike right there where that was, as well as adding a second one for playing in B. I typically only do 2 like this. Sometimes I'll put a 3rd one right here for playing in C. I don't like to put one down at every single fret, because you run the risk of splitting the fretboard. I mean, that's, if you've done any wood cutting, you know that's how you split a log. That's how you split a piece of wood, is you drive wedges in it. So driving a little nail, a wedge, it all along a straight line, along the same grain line, that's a good way to split a piece of wood. So that would, even if it doesn't do it immediately, as the temperature and humidity changes over time, that can cause a crack. So we want to avoid that. So we're only going to do 2. Sometimes I will do 3. Usually at A and B, sometimes at A and C if the customer asks for it. Now, as far as the location of the spikes go, I like to go about 1/4 of an inch off the edge of the fretboard and 1/4 of an inch off of the fret. You want it far enough in that it doesn't get in the way of the string. The string doesn't buzz off the top of it, especially if you fret the 5th string. I know traditionally you don't, but a lot of times you will, especially with melodic banjo players. And you want it far enough off the back of the fret that you can hook it up underneath. It's right up on the fret. It's going to be very hard to get that up underneath that. And I typically like to place these with the head of the nail facing inward. Some people like to do it with it facing out, but once again, that kind of gets in the way of if you fret this string. Unless you do it so close, unless you put the spike on the other side of the string right up against the edge, and then you run the risk of drilling through the edge of your fret over your neck or splitting it because you're so close to the edge. So I generally like to put it on the inside of the string. Like I said, about 1/4 of an inch off the edge of the fretboard. Sometimes I'll fudge that a little bit depending on the string spacing, but that's usually what I do. So we're going to go ahead and drill our holes and get these driven in. Okay, so first thing we're going to start our hole with just a little punch. Just pencil mark off. Now I like to use a little hand crank drill because I like to go very slow. You can really, it's very easy to drill through all the way to the back of the neck if you're not careful with this. So a very tiny drill bit, roughly the same size as our spike. And I've marked it and also taped it to ensure that I don't go too deep. Okay, so now I've drilled these holes out, because if you just try to drive these in, they're not going to go down without bending over, and that's, once again, that's putting a lot of pressure that's going to risk splitting it. So we drill these holes out first. It also means that this is not going to fit in there super tight. It still needs to be driven in with a hammer, but it's not going to be real tight. So we got to put a little bit of glue on it. So I have a little bit of super glue. I prefer Zap-A-Gap for the brand. Just in this cup here. I'm just going to dip the tip of our spike in that glue. And then we'll drive it down. We have to move very quickly because super glue dries almost instantly. So just a little bit on the tip there. And we drive it down. And I put a feeler gauge underneath it as I'm driving it down so I know how far to hammer it. I'm using a 10/1000 feeler gauge because that is roughly the thickness of a medium banjo string, 5th string. So I get it where that feeler gauge just fits underneath there. And we check it, make sure it works. Works just fine. We'll do the same thing for the next one. Turn it just a little bit. Twist it on me. There we go. Now they're in there. Check it. Perfect. Now I like to get them in there. I like to take my fret crowning file and just kind of knock the corners off of these because your hand will hit it as you're playing. So we'll just kind of round that a little bit there. right, so we got our banjo ready to go, got our spikes installed. So now all we need to do, capo this. So we're going to A here. We just push our string up underneath that. And it's going to go a little sharp because we are bending it a little bit. Just got to check the tuning by ear, and we're ready to go. So I hope you enjoyed that. Fairly simple, easy repair, I guess, or customization you can do on pretty much any banjo needs, really. But still something kind of tedious. You can screw things up really easy if you're not careful with it. So I figure it's good one to show how I go about doing that. Well, my name's David. This is Caroline Luthier, and we'll see you around.